and spoke your name into the
Let's sing it together. Worthy.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing.
Sing it out.
Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Oh.
Make this your prayer.
Jesus, the name above every other name. Yes, you are. Jesus, the only one who could ever say, yeah. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you.
Sing holy.
And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes. Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other. And Jesus, the only one who could ever say, you're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, God. Oh, we live for you. Sing holy, holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in love to those around. Sing holy. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in love to those around.
So we recognize today, God, that you have never lost a battle and you won't start now. And therefore we believe that you are trustworthy, that you will never fail, and you have never failed. So today we decide to build our lives on the name that is above every other name, the name to which every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. His name is Jesus. So let's sing this out together. Sing, I will build. Come on, sing now. We sing this to you, Jesus.
Is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not.
Make that your prayer.
I will build my life upon your love. Yes, it is a firm foundation.
The principal truth in Matthew 7:24 is what we've been singing, right? Jesus reminds us in Matthew 7 that there's foolishness when a man builds his life not on solid footing, but on shaking sand. When we build our college education for our glory, or when we build a marriage, or we build just everything around our life built around something that's not eternal. But then he tells us, blessed are you and I when we build ourselves, everything that we are, everything that we do on the foundation, the sure foundation, the solid rock, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And so that's what we're singing today. We're saying, on Christ, the solid rock, we stand, and all other ground is what? Sinking sand. And so let's just come before the Lord together, and let's just pray that together. Come on, let's just sing that one more time. So we believe that to be foundational, Father, in every avenue of our life. And we come and we say that without you, we're sure to fail. Even sadder than failing would be for us to, without you, win. And that would grow in us piety. It would grow in us self-glory. But with you, God, we are sure to win. Even if the world says we've lost, we know that if our lives are consecrated to you, that the win has been in the obedience. Thank you for the solid foundation that we have. Thank you for a university who's built on that solid foundation, the Word of God, the written Word, and the Word who is God, Jesus Christ, our Savior, the very definition of a liberator. So liberty is liberty because if the Son has set us free, we're free indeed. All of God's people said, amen. Hey, as you're having a seat, can we thank the worship collective for leading us this morning? So good. Man. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Obviously, we announced to you about 10 days ago that Nigel Farage was going to be with us, and that he was going to speak to us and teach us a lot about Brexit. Many of you are familiar with that word, but maybe not so familiar with exactly what that means and how that's shaping even your life here in Lynchburg, Virginia. Nigel had to stay in England, mainly because so much of what's happening in his country, so much of the restlessness right now in his government is looking to him to be a stabilizer. And so we understand that. This is really the reality of what happens when you get current world leaders on the schedule. You know that when they're current, that there always might be something like this what makes us pivot. But the good news is we were able to call some friends, and President Falwell will come in just a second and introduce our friends that are going to kind of come in and into his place. And you'll see why they've accepted this invitation. But let's watch this video. Nigel made a video for us, and then President Falwell will come out and introduce our guests. Let's watch this together.
I have to apologize. You see, I believe my word is my bond. I really do. And I never, if I accept an engagement, ever try to cancel or postpone it. But much as I was so much looking forward to being with you at Liberty, I'm afraid the situation in the United Kingdom means I just have to be here. We are now in the middle of a great democratic crisis, indeed a constitutional crisis. And of course, it's all about Brexit. And Brexit matters for everybody. It matters because without it, what is the point of even having democracy in our system? It matters because Brexit is the epicenter of the battle between the globalists and those who want the nation state, something that your president and his administration care about very much indeed. So I'm here, I'm in the battle. I dare not desert the men and women that are fighting with me, but I will please look forward to a fresh date, to coming to liberty, and I promise when I come back, I'm going to tell you a story of a great victory that was snatched from the jaws of defeat. Thank you.
Good morning. I was with Nigel Farage. I was sitting Becky and I were sitting next to him at Candace's wedding this weekend, and he gave a little speech, and I really admired him for saying that the two greatest countries in the world, the United States and Great Britain, and I really believe that. And it's we had to go to war to teach him a lesson once, but But we made up, and we won. So anyway, I'm going to start just by introducing. We are so honored to have Candace and George here today because they're on their honeymoon. They decided, because they travel so much, to have a staycation, something like that, stay at home. So she actually took time out of her honeymoon, and George did, to come here today. And we, go ahead. They always type up a list of things I'm supposed to say about the guests, so I'll say some of them and I'll make up some others. But she hosts the Candace Owens Show on PragerU's YouTube channel. I met some of the PragerU people at the wedding too, and they're an incredible group. Recently married the Honorable George Farmer, Charlottesville, Virginia. It was on August 31st, we went up there right after the football game, Saturday night. We were also at the table with John Voight. We were very honored to be at table number 1, thank you. And they told me not to say anything about her time at Vogue because she says everybody there has an eating disorder. So that's why I said it, because they told me not to. But anyway. Vogue magazine. But anyway, all right. The Honorable George Farmer. I met his father, who's in the House of Lords in the UK. He studied theology at the University of Oxford. He was social secretary and later treasurer of Oxford University's Conservative Association. He worked in a London investment bank for a year after college. He has since worked with his father on their commodities-based hedge fund. That's a beautiful place, by the way. If you ever get a chance to go stay at the Albemarle Estate, it's about an hour, 20 minutes from here. Save your money up and go for one night. But he's a former Brexit Party candidate and chairman for Turning Point UK. And just come on up, guys. Come on up. No need for you to sit back there, but welcome George and Candace to Liberty. Where am I sitting?
You're right here.
I was late this morning because anytime Becky comes with me, I'm late. They say if you want to be on time, marry a woman with no hair. Guys, listen to me. That's the truth. Anyway.
Hey, can we welcome them one more time to the house? Come on, put your hands together for them. So thankful you do this at your wedding day. The week after your wedding. Right off the bat, I'll start, if you don't mind. A lot of us know Candace already. She's been at Convocation as a speaker, but most of you don't know George. And so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And then past that, you met and 2.5 weeks later got engaged. And so what's that all about? All right, so give us a little bit of your story.
Thanks, David. First off, just want to say thank you for having us. I mean, what an incredible place. Liberty University, what a place. Forget the Ivy Leagues, forget Oxford, forget Cambridge. This is where it's happening right now, people.
And that's coming from an Oxford man right there.
I was sitting in bed last night reading some of these incredible little postcards you write for us. Zachary Youngdale, Alana Rivera, Scout Powell. Like, thank you all for such incredibly welcoming messages. It was really, really sweet of you to do that. So a bit about me, is that what you want, David? Yeah, so I was born and raised in London. I went to school in the UK, and I went to Oxford University afterwards, studied theology. But in the kind of academic sense of the word, so more a sort of liberal arts degree. And after that, worked in banking for a while, then worked with my father in commodities, which is sort of trading metals around the world. And at the same time I've been doing that, that's about the last 10 years, and then at the same time been quite involved in politics in the UK, to do with Brexit, which we'll talk about shortly, but really sort of the twin worlds of finance and politics in the UK for about the last decade. And then my life sort of took a bit of a change when I met this young woman on my left in December of last year at a speech in London. And, you know, guys, when you see a good thing, don't hang around. So I saw Candace and just sort of thought, yep, this is going to work. And it took me all of 2 weeks to ask her to marry me. And as I say, you know, shock tactics. It caught her off guard, and she said yes, and she didn't even know what she was doing. So there we go.
Candace is a smart lady, and I promise she knew what she was doing. One of the best things, not one of the best, but a fun thing at your wedding is everybody loves an accent, a great accent. So most of the guests were his friends and family, and I don't care what they're saying, but just to listen to them, it's just so soothing to hear an awesome accent.
What percentage of the guests at the weddings were from England, you think?
We had a lot of countries at our wedding. We had people that flew in from Japan, South Africa, a lot of people from the UK, Australia. There were a lot of different accents.
But most important, Buckingham County.
Buckingham County, which is where my family's from, hence Virginia.
And that's where my family's from, too. Yeah. And Denzel Washington's, yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, Virginia is a great state. But yes, nobody really knows the full story, but we did get engaged after 2.5 weeks, which is not that common. And he asked me in one of the most shocking ways ever. We had not had our first kiss. We didn't even technically go on a first date. I know, you guys are going, what is going on? But we were in Florida. He had followed me back from London after I was on stage ranting against socialism. And he fell in love, and he followed me back to followed me back to Florida. And we were sort of both kind of aware that I was aware that he was the one, he was aware I was the one, but none of us really had the courage, I guess, at that moment to say anything. And then he left and went back to London, and we FaceTimed. And he asked me if he could FaceTime me from an airport. He was getting on his plane to go down to South Africa. And I said, sure. So I pulled over my car, and I turned on, I accepted his FaceTime call. And do you want to tell them what you said?
Yeah, so as I said, shock tactics, crucial. Gents, if you're looking to propose, always use a line which they'll never forget. My opening line was, I need to tell you something in case this plane crashes. Which obviously then went down like a lead balloon, and she was sort of like, what's wrong with the plane? And I said, nothing's wrong with the plane, but I need to tell you this. I said, I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and will you marry me? And if the first shock tactic didn't get her, the second one did. And so she said, sort of surprised yes, which was kind of cute.
And then he had no Wi-Fi for 12 hours, and I was wondering if his plane was going to actually crash. So maybe use a different tactic next time, fellas.
You might be wondering why.
Becky, tell him how you proposed to me.
How old was Becky when you guys met? Some of our freshmen don't know this story.
We don't need to go on that story, but yeah, I proposed to Jerry. He had finished law school, and he had taken the bar exam.
Was he?
And I said, "Can we get married now?" And he said yes.
We had dated for 2 years, and I told her after I passed the bar exam, we can get married. So she remembered that. And sure enough, as soon as I passed it, she said, "Can we get married now?" I said, "Yes." Okay. Yes. Okay.
The day that you met him, was he shirtless on a horse, or did he actually have clothes on?
No, she was 13 and I was 18 when I met her.
There it is.
All right, let's not get. So Candace.
Well, hold up.
Yeah. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag
Wait.
13. Hashtag 18.
Hey girls, let's take a look at the ring on Candace's finger, by the way.
I think it's 13 carats, the same age that you were, Becky, when you guys met. So I want to transition here.
Please.
Before I get
please,
fired.
Quickly.
All right, real quick. So if you're wondering why, I know, like you just heard someone basically say, when I heard her rant against socialism, I knew that I loved this woman. That's because George is a very conservative man. He doesn't just love the Lord, he's also highly involved in politics. And one of the reasons we felt like you're a great guest, since Nigel couldn't be with us, is you're one of Nigel's biggest supporters back in the UK. Tell us a little bit about Brexit. Nigel will be with us to do the big run on that, but give us a little story on why you're invested in that and why that matters to you.
Sure. Brexit. Where do you begin? Basically, I would say the way to think about Brexit is to imagine that all the countries, I think, David, you've used this analogy before, but imagine all the countries of the North American continent and the South American continent got together and decided to form a union of nations. Now that sounds lovely in principle. It sounds like people working together, which is what we want all around the world. But then imagine that America comes along and says, well, we agree with a lot of what you're doing, but there's a few crucial points we disagree with you on. And Bolivia, Colombia, and Argentina don't agree with America and say, well, that's great, but you're part of this union, so you can't break any of the rules, and you have to do what we say. It's a bit like outsourcing your sovereignty. It's saying to another group of nations that America will be subservient to a higher supranational body.
Like Britain.
Like King George III. No, I'm joking. I mean, it's not, I mean, yeah, and actually, Jerry, I mean, that's an interesting analogy, because something I always say is that, I mean, America is the home of the free and the land of the brave. It's the home of liberty. But I mean, in the Revolutionary War, you were fighting against tyranny. Absolute monarchy is a tyranny. And for the last 100 years, Britain and America, we don't worry, we got over the Revolutionary War. We're past it now, it's fine. But anyway, for the last 100 years, Britain and America have been fighting side by side against tyranny. First World War, Second World War, Korean War, Cold War, and even in the last 20 years against the rise of radical Islam. And in many ways, Trump and Brexit represent the latest fight against tyranny. Tyranny is always subtle. It comes in obvious forms like communism and Nazism, but it also comes in subtle forms like dictatorship by unaccountable, unelected international officials who have no accountability to you or I. And that's a hugely worrying thing. And that's exactly what the European Union has become in Europe. And people will say the same things that they say in America about Trump. They'll say it's racist and it's misogynistic and it's a worrying thing for the state of the nation. But actually, that's just part of the liberal spin that so much of the world is buying right now. Actually, what Brexit is all about is about restoring choices and sovereignty to the individuals of the United Kingdom versus the European Union, which is so undemocratic that if it was its own country, it wouldn't be allowed into the European Union. That's how undemocratic it is. So that's what Brexit's all about. And that's why I think the fight in the UK, and that's why Nigel says in his video, the fight in the UK is just the latest fight for freedom in the world that America and Britain, on both sides of the Atlantic, have been championing for the last 100 years.
When Britain voted for Brexit, that's when I knew Donald Trump was going to win the presidency, because it was a wave that was coming across both of our countries. Populism, the forgotten man, the forgotten woman, the average American, the average citizen of Britain that had been ignored by the establishment. And Candace started a movement recently called Blexit. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. I mean, it really kind of all goes into in the same mentality. I guess we've sort of watched this conversation happen, and rather than people wanting to have an intellectual discourse, why are they voting Brexit? Why is America voting Trump? We see the media sort of spin everything and say, well, it's because America's just having a rise of racism and white nationalism all over again. And similarly, we see the exact same thing happening overseas. But if you actually are a Black American, that's basically letting people mine your history and your past pain so that they can sling mud at other people. And I felt that that was something that was actually harming Black America. The discussions were no longer realistic. And I saw, obviously, in 2016, one way that they tried to counter Trump's movement was with the Black Lives Matter thesis, which was essentially saying that you can't even go outside right now as a Black person in America without being gunned down by racist police officers. And during that year, I thought I was a liberal, but I just started looking at the numbers of how many Black unarmed men were being shot and killed by police. And I was shocked to discover that despite watching every single night on MSNBC and CNN, people crying and saying it was the biggest thing that was threatening Black America, 16 Black men were shot unarmed by police officers, which equates to 0.00004% of the Black population. White men were gunned down at a higher rate. Hispanic men were gunned down at a higher rate. And police officers were 18.5 times more likely to be shot and killed by a Black man than the other way around. So why the narrative? I, with Blexit, wanted to challenge the narrative, and I wanted to challenge Black Americans to consider what Trump actually asked us, which is, Black America, what do you have to lose? And in my opinion, the answer was absolutely nothing.
I agree. I loved what your best man said at the wedding in his speech. He said, now the press is going to accuse Candace of being a white supremacist for marrying you. Didn't he say something like that?
He said that Candace was America's first Black white supremacist.
That's pretty much what I have actually been called in the liberal tabloids, which is stunning.
But tell me how vicious the attacks have been. I noticed, I don't have security, but I noticed you had to have security when you travel. Tell us about some of those attacks.
You know, I try actually not to give any air to them. I think a lot of the times, yes, they do make a lot of threats, but I think it's because they want to make you fearful. They want you to be too scared to go out on a stage and talk to people about what you actually believe. And so I try to take a humorous approach and just go forward and keep talking about the things that I believe in. Yes, the thing that really bothers me is when they go after family and friends, because they didn't sign up for this. I've signed up to be a public figure. I've signed up to say what I believe. But my brothers, cousins, and sisters didn't sign up for that, and reporters and journalists, they are activists. The great majority of them are just activists, and they will try to destroy your reputation and harm those that even know you. So I think that's sort of been the thing that's been the hardest, is feeling like I'm harming people that are around me, surrounding me, just because of what I believe in.
Yeah, Becky had a reporter from Washington walk up on her in a parking garage downtown. She was getting takeout from a restaurant. She went in the parking garage. He followed her to her car and kept asking her questions, wouldn't shut up. And she said, I'm not answering your questions, leave me alone. And he said, I just want you to go to coffee with me. She said, why would I go to coffee with somebody I've never met before? So she got in her car, locked the door, and left. But that's the kind of, if he'd come up to me, he'd be done for. But anyway. I'd be sitting in the jail right now, but anyway. But no, I was so impressed with your family and with all the guests at that wedding. And George Holmes is the president of the university, one of the universities of Manchester. And he went on a cruise with us this summer. We have a friend who has a boat in Greece. And we've been there the last 3 years, and he and his wife went with us to all the Greek islands, or some of them. And anytime I'm around somebody with a British accent for very long, I start talking in a terrible British accent. And so they got me on video. I was shooting, we were shooting, pheasants. Pheasants. Some poor guy was sitting in a box, 100 degrees up there, letting pheasants out, and trying to get his hand back before we shot him. But he let the pheasants out, and I shot one, and I turned to the camera and I said, "I got it." Terrible, terrible, terrible. Anyway, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but but I was.
Caroline and Coy went with you, and they both did well. Actually, Caroline's a good shot, so.
Oh yeah,
watch out.
It's true. Caroline did great, but George has been texting me this morning, and he's in Italy. He's got a friend who's made an artist who's made a beautiful bronze bust of the president. He's gonna come over here and present it to him. So, somebody you probably should get to know, George Holmes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So where are you planning on living? Are you going to live in D.C. together?
Yeah, we are going to be in DC for the time being. We love it. We weren't expecting to love it so much, but it really is great. And I had lived in New York for 7 years, and now New York is pretty gross at the moment. It's very, very dirty. It wasn't what it was even 10 years ago. It's completely changed. But DC, on the other hand, is a very clean city. It's buzzing. There's a lot of young people there, young couples. So that is for the foreseeable future. We will be in Washington, D.C. Until I move into the White House. But right now...
Or 10 Downing Street.
Don't encourage her.
You're not old enough, are you? You're not old enough to run for president.
I will be in 2024.
So.
I said don't encourage her.
I'll be your running mate.
Yes.
What a team that would be.
A good team.
What would our slogan be?
I don't know, but I just talk. Becky's always said, no, you're going to have to get a different wife if you ever do something like that. But the other day she said, okay.
Keep liberty great would be your slogan.
Can you expound on one thing for me?
David's trying to keep it real here, people.
I'm just trying to get it back on track. It's interesting that we were talking last night at dinner, and all of your friends are in London and all over, Europe. You're leaving all of them behind in this particular season in life to come and be in D.C. because of, Candace's brand new book that's about to come out, and you're helping her with that book. Talk to us about that dynamic of the two of you. As it relates to masculinity, as it relates to being, not a feminist, but being feminine. And in that relationship, you're just this guy that at this moment of your life, you're going to give up your ambitions and career to be able to come support your wife, knowing that one day it'll come back. We'd love to learn about that and some of your thoughts on feminism as it relates to this as well.
Sure. I mean, marriage is a partnership. And we've just started on this journey together, and it's an incredible relationship. And the strongest example of marriage that the world has ever seen, and that the whole universe has ever seen, is Christ loving the church. And if Christ loved the church like a husband should love his wife, as Paul writes in Ephesians, then the sacrifice that Christ made for his bride was to lay down his life for the eternal wealth of the soul and for eternal salvation. So moving countries really isn't too much of a sacrifice compared to that. But also I don't even see it, in many ways it's not a sacrifice. It's because it's this wonderful, joyous partnership. It's something that we talked about, we discussed in the past, and it's something that you come to a conclusion and you say, at this time of our lives, what Candace is doing is incredibly important for the saving of Western civilization in many ways. And for what's happening in America right now is right on the front line. It's very current. It's incredibly relevant. And so coming over here is a completely logical and sensible step. In due course, whether or not that we go back to the UK or whatever happens, that's a decision for later down the road, and that's just part of the partnership. We'll make it together. There's one of the real problems with our society, particularly in marriage, is selfishness. And it comes down to people just saying, well, I've had a year of something that I didn't really enjoy that much, so I'm giving it up and I'm going to get divorced. And that's a huge issue, because if you can't work through problems together in marriage, what hope do you have to work through problems in your real life? You know, there's so many challenges in life, and you need a strong partner at all times to share that experience with. And it's sort of what we were talking about last night as well.
Yeah, it actually reminds me at my wedding, my bridesmaid who gave a speech, and we had been friends since childhood, and she was sort of mocking all of the different phases of Candace Owens that she's seen. And she said at one point, and she said, I remember the Candace that never wanted to get married. I remember the Candace that never wanted to have any kids. And it actually, she's obviously was telling the truth. And I was probably around your age, and definitely at the beginning of university, and I had sort of developed this feminist perspective. I mean, I was forced to take a feminism 101 class, and it was considered sort of cultural and, I guess, cool and relevant to be one of those girls that's like, I don't need a man, I'm never gonna get married. I remember having a girlfriend who said, you know, whoever marries me better know that I'm not gonna be cooking and cleaning, and he better be doing that. And this perspective that we sort of see, we see this sort of narrative and this perspective being fed to us constantly as some sort of movement towards freedom. Right? Like if you're a free woman, that's what you say. If you're a free woman, you don't want to get married, that's considered bondage. And I couldn't think that's more wrong as I stand on this stage today. And I've said this, obviously a lot of you guys follow me on Twitter, and you've seen me encourage women. I say, if you see somebody who is a feminist, I want you to put in your mind, who is the ultimate feminist that you know? Take it all the way to the end of her life, the oldest, most ultimate feminist that you know, and ask yourself one question. Do you think she's happy? So if I think of who maybe the ultimate feminist is right now, you've got the Chelsea Handler, right? Who I used to love as a child, and she, you don't need a man, don't be a man, has no kids now, doesn't have a husband. And I received a comment that I want to share with you guys on my YouTube, and I've talked about this, and it to this day breaks my heart. I had a conversation with Dennis Prager on my show, and we talked a little bit about this feminism that's sold to us when we're young, and when you get older, if you don't break free of that, you'll wake up one day and realize it was a scam. And a woman commented beneath that video, and she said, Candace, thank you so much for bringing this conversation forth for so many women to listen to. I was one of those people that fell for the scam when I was in my early 20s. I'm now 55, I'm unmarried, I have no kids, and I have to take pills to keep me happy. And she said, if there's one thing I would have done differently in life is I wouldn't have fallen for the scam of feminism. So I stand up here proudly on this stage and I say, I'm not a feminist. I'm happy to be married. I love my husband. I can't wait to have kids. And I think that's a blessing.
You've got to tell a story about the speech you gave in your freshman year at Liberty in speech class. Tell it.
Okay, yeah, I will tell that one. My freshman year here at Liberty, we had a speech class, and the assignment was give a speech on your future, what your goals are in life. And so I wanted to be a wife, and I came in with a pillow under my dress and barefoot. So barefoot and pregnant was my goal, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm very proud that I was a wife, and I am still a wife and a mother and a grandmother, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not ashamed whatsoever, and it's been a joy being married to him, and a challenge.
And that's why. And that's why I married you, is because you had that attitude. But anyway, I've been noticing the Democratic candidates have been, all right, guys, come on, am I in trouble? I don't know. I've been noticing they've been trying, in the 80s, my father was a pastor, but he was also politically active. And he was promoted traditional family values and promoted pro-life values. And he was accused by the liberals every day of wanting a theocracy, where the Bible was the Constitution, and it never was true. He just wanted to protect unborn life, and he just believed families were good for, traditional families were good for our country. But now I hear these Democratic candidates going on TV and talking about Pete Buttigieg. He was saying, what would God think about us driving cars and spewing all this exhaust into the carbons into the air? Well, and then Nancy Pelosi said something similar about what would Jesus think about us not letting immigrants come across the border? And it's like they want a theocracy now. It's the same ones that were accusing us of that. They want the country, instead of being run in a manner that's best for the citizens of the country, which is what any CEO's job is to whatever organization he leads, you do what's best for that organization. That's what I do at Liberty. And, you know, it's not a theocracy. That's what Christians need to understand, is this country is not a theocracy. It was formed to get away from that, because in the Church of England, the king appointed the archbishop. In Virginia, every citizen had to be a member, this is before the Revolutionary War, had to be a member of the church, had to pay tithes, and the government, the king, controlled the church. So he was just using the church as a way to enrich the government. And that's what Thomas Jefferson meant. I say this because he lived here locally, but that's what he meant by separation of church and state. He didn't want the government ever controlling the church. And he even passed a law that churches could never incorporate. It was in the Virginia Constitution until recently. We sued to take it out.
Is there a question?
No, I'm just telling her, I'm just asking her, what do you think when you hear these Democratic candidates try to say that it's unchristian if you don't support their views? I've never said that.
Well, I think they use God like they use Black Americans. It's whatever they think that they can say that's going to elicit a response. And I think there's no question that we've seen the left has been hostile towards God, hostile towards Christians. They're mocking Mike Pence. Does our vice president not take more hits for being a devout Christian than you've ever seen? And they've mainstreamed that mocking. Oh, he says that he puts the Lord first. And the reason for that, and George, you can jump in here, is that in order for a government to grow, which is what they want omnipotent government, right? They need to break down the family, and they need to make sure people believe in nothing other than themselves. They want narcissism. They want atheism. Because once you say, I believe that there is no higher power, that there's nobody bigger than me, it becomes very easy for you to turn to government and to man to solve all of your problems. And that sort of brings us to a socialist platform.
Yeah, atheism and socialism have a long twin history together. And if you look at the ultimate example of it, communist Russia, the state was set upon destroying the church, destroying God, destroying the family unit. It's exactly what Karl Marx wanted. And it's exactly what the left want again today. They will invoke any language or rhetoric they can to further their aims. And they'll use God when it's convenient, and they'll throw him out the window whenever they don't need him, and they'll use atheism or secularism whenever they can as well.
If it hadn't been for the black church and the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act never would have been passed. They were activists. Churches are a populist group, and that's what they don't like. They don't like that it's a movement of regular people trying to do what's best for their country. And
I think that's why it's really important to maintain the purity of the church in that regard. And I speak a lot about this in front of Black audiences and with my Blexit movement, of just realizing how people are now trying to sort of implant their ideas via the church. And it was actually Margaret Sanger who you can go look up and read what she wrote. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood. And she had developed this strategy to go to the churches to tell them to teach people that abortion was a choice and it was their reproductive rights. And she said, the black people really believe in their ministers. She wrote this in a letter. You can go read it today. And she said, we can never let it get out that we want to exterminate the black race. But they have a lot of faith in the ministry. So let's go through the churches to get this idea out there. So we have to be very careful. We have to make sure the church is always protected and the ideas are pure.
I think Jesse Jackson's still pro-life. In his early career, he said that abortion was a genocide of the black race. He said that.
She said it first. The founder of Planned Parenthood said it first. So it's one of those things that people like to bury, but it's readily available on the internet. And that's sort of that re-education that I try to do to get people to focus on the issues and decide what they believe. I'm unapologetically pro-life, so that's my stance.
Becky did her first TV interview this week in a studio with Laura Trump yesterday. She did a great job. But tell them what you said about how you feel as a mother and a grandmother about Governor Northam's comments about infanticide.
Well, I was saying that President Trump has done more for the pro-life movement than any president in history lately, thank God. And by appointing the 2 conservative judges, we're hoping for when he gets elected again in 2020, there's a very big chance that he'll get to appoint another judge. And that's the only hope we have. And I told Laura Trump, who just had a little girl 2 weeks ago, she named her Carolina because Laura, like me, is from North Carolina. And so, anyway, that's why we named Caroline. I said, can you imagine after you gave birth to Carolina that our governor, which is embarrassing, Governor Northam, said that after you give birth, the mother has a right to lay the baby to the side comfortably, he said, comfortably, while the mother decides whether to murder the baby or not. How barbaric is that we're in a time where somebody wants to murder a live baby?
And tell them what you told Laura about how Melania has been treated by the fashion magazines. It's all stuff women know more about than me, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I did a little research on how many magazine covers Michelle Obama's been on. And there's one after another. And then I compared it to how many Melania's been on. She is not getting the respect and the admiration that women, and for what an incredible role model she is not getting the respect and admiration from women for her grace and dignity and how she carries herself. And she has a great Be Best campaign where she's trying to help students, and what she's doing to fight the opioid, Jerry says I can't ever pronounce this right, opioid epidemic.
You got it.
Is amazing what she's done, because everybody knows somebody that's been affected by that and lost a friend or a loved one, and it's what she has done is she's not getting any credit for it. Fake news. Just like President Trump is not getting any credit for his pro-life stance.
And she's the best looking first lady we've ever had too, so she ought to be on the cover.
She is beautiful. And, we actually, a lot of people were saying to us about our wedding, are we going to see it featured on New York Times? Or are we going to see it on Vogue Weddings? And I said, absolutely not. We're conservative. I mean, we are boxed out culturally.
Yeah, but that wedding was so elegant and so well done, and just as classy a wedding as I've ever seen.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I want to speak just a second about the wedding. First of all, we sang Amazing Grace. We sang Be Thou My Vision. As a matter of fact, they asked 3 people from Liberty University's worship collective to come and lead that. And it was a worship service. Your pastor who came to preached the gospel. I mean, he preached out of Genesis, the gospel for anybody who was at that wedding. It was more than just a ceremony to participate in. It was a worship service for all of us to make much of God as the great foundation of your marriage. And so I pray that the same way you started is the same way you'll keep going, growing in your walk with the Lord. Can we thank this great couple for what they've done? Great job today. We have a game we want to play with them. Can we do that? We're going to play this game called the Newlywed Shoe Game. And the winner, there it is. And if they can do this right and get to a certain amount of points, obviously we have a prize for the shoe. All right, let's watch this together.
It's time to play the Newlywed Shoe Game. In this episode, we'll see the Honorable Lord George Thomas Stahl Farmer work together with his new wife, Candace Owens Farmer, to answer questions that test just how much these two lovebirds know about their relationship. Here's how the game works. Our newlyweds will sit back to back, holding one of their own shoes and one of their partners, as we ask them a series of questions about how they relate with each other. If they feel the answer to the question is George, they will hold up his shoe. If they feel the answer is Candace, they will hold up her shoe. If our couple today is able to have the same answer to 5 of our questions, they will win 1,000 British cookies for students who live on the Liberty University dorm. The shoe. It looks like our contestants today have taken their seats, so let's get ready to play the Newlywed Shoe Game.
Once again, I've been given the long mic, y'all. Come on, are you ready to play this game? All right, so you take your shoes off if you would, and you hand one to each partner. You go ahead and get the other one off too, so you can hold it in your hand. And obviously, you'll hold up. You will hold up. Thank you. All right. You ready? So here's the way we'll do it. Ready? All right. We gotta get to 5 points before I run out of questions. If we get to 5 points, the shoe gets a prize. If not, the shoe don't get jack. All right? So this is the way it's gonna work. It's up to you. All right. So you'll hold up this one, Candace, if the answer is George. You hold up this one if the answer is you, okay? You ready? Who was the very first person to declare their love publicly? There it is, 1 point. That was easy. Who has the bigger wardrobe? Who's the best driver? Who is darker? Wait. In the soul. Oh, that was set up right there. Who spends more time staring at their phone? Rapid fire. Who's more likely to cry during a sad movie? Oh. Who's a pickier eater? Who's more likely to arrive late to an appointment? There it is. Who takes the longest to get ready? Who spends more time? This question literally says, who's more spends more money? There it is. Who's more spends more money? All right. Who's more athletic? There it is. Who would last longer on a deserted island? There it is. Who's more likely to scream at the sight of a spider? Who's clumsier? Who's needier when they're sick? Who's more needy when you're sick? All right, last two. You've already got the points. The shoe's getting a prize already, all right? So hold on. Last two. Who's more stubborn? Last one. Who is sending their kids to Liberty University? Come on, y'all. All right. So here's what we've got for the shoe. We've got Walker's shortbread cookies for the shoe. So you guys are gonna get them at Community Group next week. We'll have them for everybody. God bless you. Hey, let's give it up for this incredible couple. God bless them. They're amazing. You're dismissed. Have a great weekend.